Hey guys, so this video let's talk about the tips for 6 and this is the part 6 of 6 series, right? So I have done a lot of rounds, mostly reveries, all the way under Tide of Thought, so that took 6 parts. Actually, that's another part that I did earlier, which is with Liang Yue, but after that I also did Liang Yue in reverie, so I consider that as the 6 part showcase and guide for 6. Okay, so the first tips that I want to talk about is regarding his buffs and debuff, right? So here is something that I was mistaken, or when I read up, it doesn't occur to me that it works this way, because it states that if you have all 6 buff and debuff, then when using skill 1 or skill 2 buff or debuff, he will then inflict additional effect. So if each skill can only inflict 2 buff or debuff, technically I need to do it 3 times to inflict that special effect. So here, for example, 6 does inflict, not inflict, but buff up the party with 1 random buff per round. So let's say round 1, you get 1 random buff, round 2, you get another random buff, and then in round 1, you use his skill, so that's 2 buff. In round 2, you use his skill again, there's another 2 buff. So now he got 6 buff. So I was thinking that you have to use another of his buff skill in order to inflict those or apply those special effects like empowerment. Because now, to me, it's like you got to wait until you have 6, then now you use his skill, and now you get that special effect. However, this is not the case. So when you apply his buff, the moment this round that you apply the buff and the buff hits 6, instantly the special effect will be triggered. Okay, so his rotation and everything is actually much simpler, because now I need to reduce, or I don't have to use that additional buff or debuff as I initially thought. So for example, if the enemy currently have 4 debuff, so you use S1 and that will inflict 2 more. So now the enemy have 6, instantly you will trigger poison and burn. For buff, then you will get empowerment and plus 10 Eureka if that character have Eureka. For tips number 2, if another unit share the same debuff and buff in 6 collection, make sure to inflict or apply their buff debuff first before 6. Because here, if the other unit inflicted or applied debuff or buff, then 6 will prioritize to inflict other buff and debuff that is not inflicted on the enemy. However, if all buff are already inflicted and applied, then when you use 6 skills, 6 will start to override. Okay, if the buff or debuff that the other unit applies is weaker than 6. And once he overrides it, then the other character will not be able to override it again until that buff or debuff expires, then only that they can apply it. Okay, so whatever you do, try to apply all the buff from the other unit first, or debuff from the other unit, before you start applying 6. Okay, so basically it's just the order on which skill you use first. So 6 you put it behind, but make sure you do it before, like when you're attacking the enemy. Okay, if it's buff and debuff wise, you use it after the other allies, but before their attacks, right? Because you want your character to be fully buffed up or the enemy to be fully debuffed before you start attacking. For tip 3, not really a tip, but more like here I put out this information so you can use it as a guide. So for example, for example, in terms of debuff, 6 has minus 30% crit defense, minus 20% crit resist, minus 20% damage reduction, and then it has relative defense or mental defense down. So out of this 5 buff, 4 is really useful. Relative or mental is either or, you can't really apply it because the character that we have is either relative or mental, okay? Unless in your team you have a mixed team, like a sub DPS that is relative, a DPS that is mental, then yes, you can technically apply or use 5 of these debuffs. Fracture is, I think when you're attacking and if they have fracture, you do Genesis damage, but the Genesis damage is so small, so it is just there for fun. Not really for fun, maybe some character where they need negative status, like Anjonala or Noir, so it will be useful for them. Okay, so in terms of character that also have debuff that is similar to 6. So first, Auric. Auric has damage taken reduction, and it ranges from 30 to 70% depending on the decryption. So it's better than 6. So 6 will not be overwriting Auric, so you don't have to worry about that. Then we have Isolde that has minus 25% crit damage, and that is weaker than 6. Unless you are using Isolde rank 2 or rank 3, then it will be the same or higher than 6. Okay, so do be careful with that one. For reality and mental defense, it is the same as 6, so it doesn't really matter. Tuesday, minus 20% crit resist is also the same as 6. Anjonala has fracture. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if this fracture 1 or fracture 2. And if, let's say, if it's 1 and 2, you can inflict both. I never really test this out, but yeah, maybe I will clarify this. But at this point, to me, it's the same. I'm not sure. Okay, I will check this out. Okay, for Igor, his bullet, if you have a certain bullet, he can also inflict debuff. So there's minus 25% relative defense, which is stronger than 6, and minus 20% crit defense, which is weaker than 6. Because 6 is 30%. Okay, Shemaine has minus 15% reality and mental defense, and that's lesser than 6. So overall, do you want to overwrite it? Well, if you have so much AP that you can keep spamming 6 debuff, then by all means, you should overwrite it. But to me, don't. Then if you have more AP, use your buff, right? Start buffing your character up. Then you have even more buff and debuff and all that bonus going on to allow your main DPS to do even more damage. For tips 4, the buffs, he have 20% damage dealt, 20% follow-up damage dealt, 20% penetration rate, and 30% incantation might. 30% ultimate might, and 30% Genesis damage dealt. So NN Lee has 30% damage dealt, and that is better than 6. This NN Lee is E2, okay? E2 NN Lee. Auric has 30 to 79%. Maybe a typo. I think 70%, sorry. 30 to 70% ultimate might. The full version of this infographic, I will definitely fix that. But anyway, that's stronger than 6. Pickles has a bunch of buff as well, but actually most of it doesn't coincide with 6. The only thing that coincides is this 20% penetration rate, and that's the same as what 6 provides. Jiuliangzi have 20% incantation might and ultimate might. That's weaker than 6, but let's say Jiuliangzi have these 2 buffs, and 6 will randomly apply 1 buff. So after 2 rounds, there will be 2 buffs, so total will be 4. And hence, you use another buff card on Jiuliangzi, then she will have all 6, and she will get empowerment. So for tip 5 for the rotation and various team comp, so suggest to focus only on debuff or buff, or else you will need too much AP. So for example, if you want to inflict all debuff, then you use ultimate S1, round 1, then round 2 you use S1 again. So that will inflict all 6 debuff. So after that, you just keep repeating. So he just need 1 or 2 AP every round. Whereby for the buff, basically it's alt. Again, typo there, so it should be alt, S2, and then S2, and then repeat. Okay, I'm so sorry that I cannot adjust this before releasing this due to my schedule. So yeah, I will fix this in the infographic. Okay, so alt, S2, S2, repeat. For tip 6 is that if there is a higher rank incantation or mechanics to extend 6 debuff or buff, there is no need to re-inflict and apply his debuff and buff every round. So this means that we can use both. Okay, for example, Liang Yue can rank up his cards and also increase the duration. So Liang Yue, as you all know, there's a green, red, and a mixed zone where the green and red coincide. So if you use the card in the green zone, duration will +1. Instead of 2 rounds, it will be 3 rounds. Okay, so if you can consistently get everything at 3 rounds, so let's say round 1, you apply 2 buff for 3 rounds. Round 2, you don't do anything. And by round 3, now you apply the buff again, then your character will have all 6 buff. Okay, then you will trigger empowerment and all those stuff as well. Now, if this is in the red zone, then you will rank up. So rank up, you will not only inflict more debuff, but the duration will be extended as well, because at rank 2, it is also 3 rounds. And you will inflict like 3 debuffs. So similarly, you just can do it every other round instead of every round. So the rotation then become ultimate S1, then next round you use S2. Or you can use ultimate, then you start with S2, the next round you use S1. And then you just keep repeating. You will have all the buff and all the debuff inflicted and applied on the enemy and your own character, right? So giving you the best of whatever 6 can provide. And tip 7 is that, based on tips 3 and 4, like I mentioned, if other unit has the same buff and debuff, so again, just let them inflict their debuff, for example, then only 6 does that. Once you got 6 of the debuff on the enemy in the next round, then you use the buff. So you also can do what the rotation that I mentioned for Liang Yue, ultimate S1, next round S2, or ultimate S2, next round S1. Okay, so you can do that as well. If other character can apply the same buff and debuff as 6. For tips 8, if you are not going for 2-round rotation, he will guaranteed to get his ultimate in 3 rounds because he get 2 Eureka every single round. So if you just stand there and not do anything, you will be able to get 6 Moxies and you will get his ultimate. And make sure to use his ultimate, especially 1 round before the enemy will be casting their ultimate. That's because using his ultimate, apart from the 2 debuff that he will inflict at random, he will also inflict 2 negative status, miss aim and blind. That is fixed. You will definitely get this. Okay? And that can reduce the damage of the enemy by 30%, including the relative defense and mental defense that he also provides to the team every single round. He actually provides a lot of defensive mechanism to your entire team, and that makes him actually pretty good if you really need that extra layer of defense. And the final tips here, because 6 has so many buff and debuff that's pretty generic. He has some for ultimate, he has some for extra action, some from incantation might, and all that stuff. He actually works pretty well in all the team. But again, as I mentioned before, he works pretty well, but not the best. Okay? He works pretty well, but not the best. A lot of these characters, if you have their dedicated teams, you technically don't need 6. Okay? So, yeah. So, do remember that. Okay? At the moment, Liang Yue without He Guang, definitely 6 will be the better option together with Flutter Page. So, if it's Liang Yue, the rotation, you want to go for mix. Jiuliangzi, because she have the incantation might and ultimate might, you also can go for mix because every other turn you just need to apply the buff. So in the round when you're applying buff, apply debuffs. Okay? Apply debuff. But you may not get all 6 debuff on the enemy. But buff, for sure, you can get it all 6 on Jiuliangzi. Kalabauna also focus on the buffs only. You don't focus too much on the debuff because Kalabauna uses so much AP. And the buff really helped Kalabauna out because I think out of the 6 buff, she can use all 5. That's extra action, all those things that will work for her. Empowerment is also very important for Kalabauna. Igor, again, since he can inflict 2 of the debuff, so you go for mix. Rank up, here this is one thing. If you reset incantation and so happen that the higher rank incantation becomes 6, in that case, you can go for mix. Okay, and if you have like Villa, you have Argus, it's quite likely that will happen. Especially if you get rank 3, because rank 3 inflict all 6 buff and debuffs for 4 rounds. So you just inflict 1 time, or apply it 1 time. For the next 4 rounds, you don't have to do it anymore. You already have all 6. Alright? Poison team, focus on debuff, especially the future poison team, because every time you have the debuff all max on the enemy, he will inflict poison. So if you keep doing attacking his debuff every round, there will be actually quite a lot of poison. Okay, so you can actually do that. But for Willow, I would suggest buff over debuff because Willow doesn't need that many poison, just enough for her to convert. So instead, if you use buff, you can get Willow skill higher rank, and the higher rank the skill is, the more poison that she will convert to Hexbane, and the more Hexbane that she will be triggering, like more instances of time, which means much more damage. For Lingering Glow, you can go for Mix also because of ESOL, right? Because ESOL apply 3 debuff that coincide with 6. But if there are no Lingering Glow, then focus on debuff because you can inflict more burn, and burn help to increase Lingering Glow stacks. Impromptu, go for debuff. There is an argument here. Why not buff? Because you can plus 10 Eureka to the character that you're buffing. Again, we have to remember that all these stats on one character, for Impromptu, it will be divided by 4. And out of all the buff, Impromptu make use of Incantation Might, Damage Dealt, and Penetration Rate. Ultimate Might, no. Genesis Damage, no. Unless you have Voyager, but still, it's not going to be that much. And then follow-up attack, no. So if 20% from all these buffs divided by 4, you're only getting 5% each. But one thing, if you can use that buff, let's say on Baccarola, increasing her Eureka to 10, because most of the time you can just use 2 of Baccarola's incantation and you will be out of Eureka. 2 or maybe 3. But so now if you can add 10 more, you can use more. But the thing is that, if you use more, there's plus 1 more attack or 20% damage dealt to Impromptu. Now, if you look at the debuff, there is mental defense down, there is damage taken, there's crit defense down, there's crit resist down. So these are 4 debuffs that you can make use and allow Impromptu to hit harder. So overall, I would suggest you to focus on debuff if you are using 6 with Impromptu. Okay. Lastly, Dynamo. Dynamo, they make use of both Ultimate Might and Incantation Might. So definitely go for buff. You can use 5 out of 6 of those buff. So it's very good. Okay. Yeah, so basically that's all for this video. These are all the tips. This is all the discussion for the various teams. So thank you very much for watching and have a good day.